For the past 4 generations, my family has lived polygamously. So I come from a ginormous family. I have 1 dad, 4 moms, and more siblings than I have fingers or toes to count.
Like double.
Yeah.
44.
44 siblings. Yeah.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Figuring It Out. Today we have somebody on the show that should have his own show on TLC, but you will find out why very shortly. My good friend Calvin Wayman is joining us in the studio. What's up, bro?
We've been having a good time.
Dude, it's
I'm
been
happy
good.
to be here.
It's been
Just
good.
chilling.
It's unfortunate that the problem was the chords, because it would have been great to record everything that was going on up to this point.
I'm not even looking forward to what we're about to talk about because we already did it.
Yeah, but I wasn't a part of that, so
It was
I feel
good.
like I need to be filled in.
Let me tell you, it was the best.
This
conversation.
episode that you have not heard yet was the best.
Yes, it was
Okay.
excellent. All right, so why don't we just start with a little bit of context here, take us back, as far as you can remember, bring us up to speed, let's say a minute, 2 minutes, just get the audience caught up with where we are.
Like literally go to my childhood?
Childhood, yeah.
I remember if I could crawl, bro. Waymans have crazy memories.
Well, let's start there.
I remember wearing a diaper and getting on a teeter-totter and getting a sliver in my thigh, and I bled, and my brother got it out. I was like really young.
What a good brother.
Yeah.
That's nice.
That's very
Was that a
nice.
brother that you were close with?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, that's what made him close to me. I always remembered that because he got the sliver out right before we changed my diaper. I was very happy.
nice.
Yeah.
So what happened after that?
Well, how much context are we talking?
Yeah,
like
let's just-
Should
let's
we
just-
drop any bombs?
No, let's go 30 seconds, just high level before we get into specifics. Like,
So
how'd you grow up?
So I grew up a special kind of Mormonism. Some people know regular Mormons. I'm known as a Mormon fundamentalist, no longer. Fundamentalist Mormons are like, however Mormons were in the late 1800s, early 1900s, that's how my family grew up. So if you've ever heard about Joseph Smith being a polygamist, the founder of Mormonism, or any Mormons being a polygamist, my family still lives that way. So for the past 4 generations, my family has lived polygamously. So I come from a ginormous family. I have 1 dad, 4 moms, and more siblings than I have fingers or toes to count.
Like double.
Yeah.
44.
44 siblings. Yep.
Yeah. So
And we all grew up in the same house.
how many acres?
1.
How many bathrooms?
How many bedrooms?
13.
Oh, okay.
13 bathrooms?
Yeah.
How did your dad
Roughly.
make money? That's a lot of people.
Construction. It is a lot because
To provide for, seriously, yeah.
yeah, we grew up in a way that we had our own garden. We grew in our own cattle. We took care of ourselves with meat, pork, chickens, vegetables, and all that sort of stuff, and a little bit of child labor laws not mattering in my
that's fair.
upbringing.
That helps.
So construction was the primary thing, and we all just kind of pitched in. Yeah.
That's crazy. You obviously now are not in it. You said about half of your siblings are still, half of your siblings are not.
Yes.
What was the breaking point for you? I actually really want you to tell this story. We were talking one time, actually at a mastermind. I think we both had a few drinks, and we were sitting in somebody's hotel room and just like chilling after one of the sessions or something. And I remember you telling a story about going off to college.
Yeah.
And then this philosophy professor or something tells you this like it's from Socrates or something like that.
Close.
Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So
Plato.
yeah. Socrates student or whatever. So first of all, going to college is a big fucking deal. We can curse, right? It's a big fucking deal in my culture because the world was going to end in any day now, and the worst thing you could possibly do is not be in the religion when the world ends, because you wouldn't have a chance to have eternal life. And because of that, many families were pulling their kids out of public schools and all that sort of stuff, like becoming very isolated from the outside world. My family was such family. I did not ever go to any public school. I was homeschooled my entire life. By the time I was like 21, 99% of the people that I knew in my life had the last name Wayman.
Wow.
That's my last name. So when I decided to go to college, nobody in my family had ever gone to college. I'm still the only child of all of my dad's kids that had gone to college.
Why? Like, why did you decide to go?
Because I love learning stuff. I wanted to, like, one of the benefits of homeschool is it taught me that I could learn things and I could figure it out. And I just always loved stacking knowledge and learning more. And I was curious about business and curious about other things too, like computers and stuff. But long story short, I finally convinced my grandfather, who's one of the church leaders, and my dad to let me go. And
it was the biggest mistake they ever made.
Exactly. My dad's like, they're like, well, we're just concerned that you're going to be filled with liberal professors. You're going to start thinking different thoughts. You'll leave and then you'll start wearing short sleeves or something. And I'm like, I promise you, none of that will ever happen.
How did you convince them? Like, what was like your argument to be able to go?
The degree that I was going for.
Okay.
Business.
Okay.
And at the time, everybody in my family were in construction.
Oh, okay.
So my grandfather was like, yeah, it's probably a good idea that we have, because you're not an identity when you're in this religion, or I don't know how much they're like, you're not an individual. Everything is for the hive, the colony. And that was kind of the ultimate decision that was like, yeah, it's probably be good if we have someone in the family that knows business.
Yeah.
Okay.
So part of taking college, I learned, is you just have to take, even though you're going for business, you have to take stuff that's not business.
Prereq, yeah.
Prereq. I had to take this philosophy class.
What school did you go to? Like, was it close? Was it far? Did you have access to your family still?
Yeah. So part of the deal, I went to the University of Utah.
Okay.
Started off at this little college called Salt Lake Community College. But part of the deal was live at home still.
Gotcha.
Do not do, like my grandfather was very clear, don't do any extracurricular stuff. They're going to want you to join whatever fraternities. There's a lot of parties.
Whatever,
Don't go to any parties. And I was like, can I go to football games? He was like, yeah, you can go to football games. That was the one thing. So I went to Utah Ute football games. That was literally the only thing. I didn't go to any college parties so that I could not get tempted or any of that stuff. But anyway, so I lived at home and I take this philosophy class, and how the story goes is the whole semester is themed around the Matrix, this whole class. If you know the story of the Matrix, like Neo's like in this world that you realize we're all living in this simulation. What a lot of people may not know is the Matrix is based on Plato's allegory of the cave. That's where it comes from. So Plato's allegory of the cave, how it goes is there are these people inside of a cave, and that's where they've been their whole life. They're chained inside the cave. And the philosophical question that my professor asked is, are they sad? Of course they're not sad. Why would they be sad? It's what and we're like, well, they're chained, they're in. It's all they know, right? Like, if somebody doesn't know they're trapped, are they really trapped? Well, we know they are, but they don't. Mm-hmm. It's like having deer that's in like a natural reserve. Yeah, there's a fence. We know they're protected. They don't know, whatever. That's the whole argument. And in the story, every day, these shadows appear in front of the people on the wall in front of them. And that's the time they're the most excited, because they're sitting there and these shadows appear and they make meaning out of those shadows, the different shapes and what it means. Like, it's everything to them. And one day, one of the people inside of the cave breaks loose from the chains. And the first thing he does is there's like a wall behind them that he always wanted to go check out. And he goes and checks out behind the wall and sees that the shadows that were on the wall are created by objects that somebody's holding up in front of a flame. And like, this is mind blowing for this guy, because the shadows were their complete reality. Yeah. Like, the shapes were just as real as anything. They talk about what it means. And it's like the first time is like, it's created by this object? What? And then he sees a crack in the wall and goes towards it and leaves the cave. So he thought, let's say the shadow was a shape of a tree. He thought that was ultimate reality. Then he sees somebody holding up the shape of a tree. It was like, that's ultimate reality. Then he leaves the cave and he sees a real tree. Like, his mind is blown. Like, everything that he knew shattered, scared him to death. And then after it scared him to death, he was like, but this is kind of awesome. There's so much more to life. There's a lot out here. So he explores a lot. And then after he realizes how mistaken he was, and he's enjoying life so much, what do you think he wants to do with his loved ones?
He wants to tell them,
Yeah. So eventually he goes back to the cave to let his friends, family, and loved ones know like what he's discovered and what he's found. And first when he goes in the cave, his eyes were adjusted to the light, and so he couldn't really see, and so he like stumbles into the cave, and everybody's like, "Bro, where have you been? Like, we've been worried about you." And he starts telling them all the things he's learned, going over their head. They have no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah,
they have no context. They're like, "Bro, you're high." Whatever.
Yeah, you're crazy. Yeah,
you're a crazy person.
Thou art high.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he starts telling them like, no, like a tree is like this. It's not like that. And eventually, out of frustration, one of his family members were just like, you're just talking crazy talk. Like, what could be better than the shadows? And he's like, don't you understand? These shadows are nothing compared to what's real and what's out there. Then all of a sudden they feel threatened. Like, are you trying to take away our shadows? And they conspire, they kill him. That's how my professor tells the story. So my professor tells us all this story, and then she says, okay, class, now I want you to reflect on these questions. Who are you in the story? Mm. Can you honestly say that you're someone that is curious and wants to discover truth? Are you willing to leave everything you've ever known in pursuit of truth? Like, would you be willing to leave the cave?
Yeah.
Or, and this was the big explosion in my brain, is she was like, or how do you know that you're not, that you think you're learning something new, but how do you know you're just not sitting in the cave and looking at shadows on the wall?
Yeah.
And that was the first time in my life I was like, holy fuck. Everything that was the most important thing to me was some other projection. Like somebody else, like read these books, right? Oh, and I felt, and it makes me feel like I'm studying. I now call this like mental masturbation. Like it's not real. Like it's like trying,
there's our episode title.
Yeah. It's like it feels like, oh, read this book, you're going to get smarter, read this book, but it's all within the same canon, the same cave, the same projection. Right. And so that was the beginning. Like it honestly scared the hell out of me.
That was like freshman fall semester.
Yeah. That was the crack. That's what made me say, holy shit, what if I'm living in a cult?
Okay. So there's two kinds of people. Like there's people that go and they get told something like that, or they go to college and their faith system crumbles, you know,
Yep.
Like when we were in our faith system, and I'm sure you heard the same, like you'd hear about those people that went to college, they got liberal ideas, they left their faith.
I heard about them all the time. Yeah.
So like, I'm always curious, like, what do you think made you go like actually shatter and reconsider yourself versus like, I'm sure you were told your whole life, like put up the roadblock and go like, that's what they're going to tell me.
I didn't reconsider it. Interestingly enough, what I did is I saw something, and this is what I realized. I realized that my faith foundation was on shaky ground because it wasn't something that I discovered.
Yeah.
So this is what
it can't happen overnight. You know, like something that's drilled into your mind. Like your mind is nothing but a computer program that's written with code based on experiences and input from people around you and authority and all of those things. So like you can't rewrite all that code in a single class. You know?
Yes. So, but this is a big point. Reconsider it. Yes, that's ultimately what I was doing. But really what I was doing at that point is I was so freaking scared that I was wrong. And I was like, well, I know that I actually do care about whatever the truth is. So if I'm honest with myself and I care about that, then I'm going to go see if I can figure it out. And all of my studying really at the beginning was like, wasn't to see if I'm wrong. I'm like, I'm going to go if it's true, I'll find out.
Yeah, search for proof.
I'll confirm it. And so I kept digging so that I had a solid foundation to confirm that it was true. And that did not turn out so well. So good. That did not go well.
Was that like independent self-study type stuff? Or did
Yeah.
you try to take classes or anything like that?
I took classes. There was now electives that I could take. I was like, okay, I'm going to take a world religion class. I'm going to take an Asian religion class, things that are different. Again, all those things are like, it's weird because I'm like, okay, I'm going to find truth that points back to this, because I have to believe that if this is true, then I'll find it independent of the cave stuff, like what my dad, with the books and all that stuff. And the more I did it, I was like, fuck, this is not working out the way that I thought. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. Like, oh, man.
So during that process, were you still hiding it from then your family that you were doing that? Or were you? Yeah, so you were at that point like, oh, I'm going to do this knowing they're not okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're afraid of like being ostracized. Like, it's like being kicked out of the camp butt ass naked in the middle of a snowstorm. That's what it feels like internally.
Yeah.
I don't know about your experience, but it was like in this whole time, incredibly isolating, because number one, we were so private to the outside world. Like, we hid the fact that we were polygamists. We didn't own it and be like, you know what, if you don't like it, go screw yourself. It was like, no, like, don't let anybody know who you are, be very private. So,
well, because it was illegal at the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Living in polygamy was legal. I have grandparents, great grandparents on both sides that have spent prison time because they were polygamists for no other reason, which is a whole other, I don't agree with that. That's a whole other conversation. But I didn't tell anyone in college where I came from. Like, no, I did not make friends. And so I didn't have those people to talk to, and nobody at home didn't even have the context for it. Similar to trying to explain to somebody inside the cave what you've seen.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a very long,
They just think you're crazy.
Yeah. It was a very long, isolating, arduous process.
Yeah, that's funny because that's in our trailer episode, that's what we say is like, we all experience things differently, but the one thing that we all have in common is it was some of the loneliest times to go through, because you just like, there's nobody I can talk to about this, because everybody I know believes all the same things. And we're all told the same stuff about people who stop believing the stuff that we believe. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have a certain perception of those, like they're immediately bad, they're sinful, like whatever, terms you want to describe them as. And you're like, well, I don't want to be that, like, I don't know about you, but for me, I kind of similar was just like, I felt like I was hoping I was going to come back to the conclusion that I already had before I started the process. Which I just didn't tell anybody, because I was like, it's probably just a phase. Like, I'll come back around at some point. And, obviously didn't happen.
But that's what's funny is like your story, like the element of polygamy is extreme, and like, we don't relate to that.
Yeah.
But everything you're saying, like, feeling like the crack in the belief system, feeling isolated. You talked about that, and you're like, being scared to question it, like, all that's the same. But that's one of the reasons, like, I look back now and go, like, it is all the same. Like, it's just these extreme lines drawn in the sand where there's no real foundation to it.
That's how Travis and I think, really connected on this whole, like, I think you're actually the very first person that I ever felt like I truly connected with that got it. Because you went, and it's a completely different religion, completely different process, but very much like, you went to school in the same thing. It's what you knew. It's like all the people you knew, like very strict rules, like, and then deconstructed. And like, I think something that you probably felt this fear even when you were going through it, or like, of leaving it, of being damned. At least that's some of the stuff that I had,
right. Of like, what if they are right?
Exactly. Yeah. What if I'm wrong? That's a big thing in my church. Like, they often say, like, we're the one true church, and my church leader often says, you're going to die and find out your mistake. And he's always trying to scare people.
Terrifying.
Yeah, you're always trying to scare people that you're going to die and discover your mistake, and that we were the right ones, and that you're screwed.
Right. So. Which is
what every religion says.
Yeah, exactly. Almost verbatim.
Which is crazy, because like,
I love that so much. I honestly do. I love so much how completely different cultures of fundamentalism come up with similar patterns.
Yeah.
It's so funny, dude, because like you were saying your dad like drank alcohol and like you showed us a video of your pastor that like cursed on stage. It's just so funny. Like you grew up in such an extreme version of Mormonism with polygamy. And like I would look at that and I would go, like, it was funny. We had this conversation at Vid Summit just briefly. And I was like, yeah, I feel like Eric always gives me a hard time because I can never like call what I grew up in a cult. And I'm just like, I call it a bubble. You know, it was a bubble. I grew up, you know, from 3 years old to 21 years old, everything was the same. You know, it was a bubble. And then I talked to you at Vid Summit and I was like, I think I was introducing to somebody. I was like, he grew up in like an actual cult. And then you were like, it's funny that you say that because I don't really view what I grew up in as a cult. And I was like, maybe there's something to that. Maybe like both of us are sitting here trying to deny the fact that like, it was an extreme, regardless if you want to put the label on it or not put the label on it, it was still an extreme version of a religion that most people understand, but not to the depth.
I think
I'm getting more open to call it a cult. Interestingly enough.
I think cult is such a loaded word. Talking about it's not super helpful to like helping people out of them.
Exactly.
But
I love that a lot.
Yeah, but I love like Stephen Hassan he calls them high control groups. Like, and I think that's a lot better. And he breaks it down like you have the behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control. And like when you read through his like list of things, which everyone should just Google the bite model. But like when you start looking, you're like, dude, it's a cult. Like that's what it is. Like,
I love the bite model. I don't know why. I've looked at it. I'm like, that wouldn't help me. That wouldn't have helped me when I'm in it. Because being in a cult is like a one-way mirror. It's like those rooms that you're being interrogated in. You can only see it from the outside.
That's why I was curious how you got. Sorry, that's why I was curious how you got that crack from that conversation. Because I talked to people who had the same experience as me to a T, same church, same environment, and someone asked me the other day, like, how did you see it as a teenager who'd never left, and how did they not see it? And now they're like, whatever.
It's like they bite down further, or they start. Like entertaining
what's
the
in
idea.
Somebody to see it.
The thing that was for me,
I think that's the personality difference I always talk about because that's exactly how we were. Like if it wasn't for you, that's why I always say like people, I feel like you give yourself a hard time, but I'm thankful for that because I'm such a rule follower that I would have never questioned any of it. But once I actually like, that's why I'm thankful that you weren't like overbearing with it or like controlling with it. You were very much of just like, you asked me the questions until I realized that I didn't have the answers. So like, to me, I think it's definitely a personality thing. Cause like, I would have never drank alcohol. I would have never done any of those things. Like just cause I didn't have like any desire to, but
now
then
we can't stop you.
But like, that's the difference. I think it's a personality difference. Cause I think that like, I found comfort in the rules as opposed to like you or like, and my sister, I think is the same exact way. Like you guys, like the second you had the chance to, were like, if I ever get the chance to, I want to. For me, I didn't even entertain the thought of it. Cause it was just like,
it's funny because we had that conversation pretty early on where we would get preached at and be like, it was always the extremes. There was never a version of like being able to drink a White Claw on an afternoon with a couple friends and have a good time. That was never, it was always like you take a sip of liquor and you're going to be like selling your kids shoes for that last hit of cocaine in like the next 3 months. You know what I mean?
Remember that story. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
you know what I'm talking about. It's a real story.
That
they would tell in the sermon illustrations.
Like I heard singing and then.
Yeah. Right.
Wait,
exactly.
No, I don't know this. Will you tell the fast version of that story?
It's probably not a true story, but it's basically this guy that his kid was really sick and needed medicine, and he went and spent his money on alcohol or cocaine.
He went to go get the medicine, basically, but he was so addicted to the alcohol, he went and bought the alcohol.
He got very drunk. He was walking down, and then he heard music, the most beautiful music he'd ever heard, and it was a mission, and they were playing music, and then he ended up going and getting saved and crying because his kid died. There's a billion of those. We could do a whole episode. We should do a whole episode on crazy
sermon illustrations.
Because that's like a very basic one.
Yeah, like the Welcome to the World of AIDS.
Welcome to the World of AIDS is the best.
That's a good answer. Yeah.
Wait, just say no idea.
Just tell the story really quick.
And
then one thing I want to put a pin in, I do have a story on this line of what makes somebody different and how they come up with it, but we can.
But this is important.
Yeah,
this is important. Story
this is another sermon illustration.
Am I hearing you right? The aid or
Welcome
AIDS?
to the world of AIDS.
AIDS.
The
Getting
disease.
AIDS.
The disease.
Yes,
Like
it is.
the
And there's
horrible
like
disease.
there's like
Oh, this
three
is gonna be
variations,
good.
but
Yeah, there's a
they're
few
all
different
pretty much the
variations,
same.
which basically tells you how made up the story is.
Okay.
But it's basically like this girl grows up, Christian or whatever, gets a bunch, just a fast version of the story. Everybody tells her not to go to these parties, not to hang out with these people, and blah, blah. And she decides to go to this party one day. And then she was telling them no, that she can't have anything to drink. And then they, the peer pressure, like got her to take a first drink. And then she had more drinks. And then she ended up going home with this guy, and they like had sex. And so she wakes up feeling guilty and horrible, and like she sinned and all this stuff. And then she wakes up, turns over, and on the nightstand, there's a little black casket, like a little miniature casket. And and it's a note that's addressed to her. So she picks up the casket and opens it up. And inside there's another note, and she opens up the note, and it says, "Welcome to the world of AIDS." And it's basically this sermon illustration that says like, like don't have sex before you're married because you're going to get AIDS and die.
Yeah.
But that's so scary.
so
Yeah,
when
well,
you're
for
a
a
teenager.
13-year-old, like, well, they would tell that stories like when we're in elementary school, bro. You're like 11, you're like, you don't even know what sex is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Can you tighten that?
I think so.
but yeah, what I was going to say something on the lines of like what makes certain people figure or like start sooner down the journey. For me, it was, or what helps somebody that's in it get out of it. For me, it wasn't like stories or anything like that. It was experience. Once I left and I experienced things in life that were in complete contradiction to the things that I thought were absolute truth, like zero budging on it. It's 100% true. And then I would experience something that would be in contradiction of that truth. I was like, well, it's clearly not absolutely true, or this could not be happening right now.
There's some gray area.
So yeah, so is that occasionally? Is that there's sometimes where that's not true or that is true? Like that was the first time where I was like, what else isn't true?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was the question, the burning question in my mind of like, if this one thing that's like a tenet of what I believe could potentially not be true because I've experienced that fact, then what other things do I fully 100% believe that just might not be true? You know what I mean? It was just like a scary reality.
We all have those too. The question that I started to ask myself, people always ask, well, how did you leave? What got you to leave? I asked myself a question that I think is incredibly useful in retrospect. And I asked myself, why am I here? What's making me stay? And I think that's a much more
in the
question.
religion.
Yeah. I think the difference between different people is I was just brutally honest with myself in that question.
Yeah.
Why, instead of why do I leave? Why am I here? And I looked at other people in different religions that we were taught were they're wrong. And I'm like, well, if they're wrong, they probably don't want to be wrong. Why are they in it?
Yeah.
Why are they in it? Why are these friends in this church down the street
Yeah.
that we all believe they're wrong? Why are they in it? And if you were to ask that person, they'd be like, well, because we're true and stuff like that. And then I would reflect on me. Well,
But that's
if they
exactly
asked
what I
that
would
to
say.
me, I would say that.
Yeah.
What the heck? And then I started to be like, oh my gosh, what they're in it because
They were
they
told.
were told this. They were born into it. Holy shit.
They're in their own
if
cave.
I was born in theirs, where would I be?
Travis said, I talked about
We
that.
didn't
And
even need you to
I was
come.
honest with myself. I'm like, okay, I started to learn about odds and probability. I'm like, well, if I was
Exactly. That's what I was saying.
Bro,
Yeah.
what's
if I was
crazy-
in theirs, I probably would also say the same thing about theirs and not
Right.
this one. But if this is ultimately true, holy crap!
And if there's only one truth, but there's 350 different belief systems, or at this point, there's, got to be literally thousands if you really looked at like different sects of different like high level religions or whatever. What are the odds you were born into the only correct one?
right.
They're infinitesimally low.
What's crazy is I was listening to a comedian.
That's why you should be so grateful. By the way, you should be so
right,
grateful.
exactly.
born,
The
yeah.
I
chances
used
are
to,
so low.
that used to be like the
prayer
introduction of my prayer. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
I'm
Like,
so grateful.
God, thank you so much for putting me in America and putting me in this religion that's right, and then
America,
also
which
putting
most
me
represents
in the
Jesus'
best
values.
church of this best religion and being in the like. Thank you so much. Wow, that's awesome. You know what I mean? And then later it was like, that's what the other guy's saying. So which one of us is correct here, you know? And then the last thing that I'll say before sorry, I know you want to say something. Last thing I'll say on that is where it started changing for me was when I finally started feeling really hypocritical because, you know, and I'm sure you were the same way. We grew up basically knocking on people's doors, inviting them to church. And we were always inviting people to church. And I would always be soul winning is what we called it, or handing out tracts and getting people to come. But then
hold on, like cassette tapes, tracks? What are you talking about?
Oh, like no, tract.
Cards.
Oh, it's a card. Okay.
Yeah, tract.
I was like some people give out like, hey, listen to my music.
No.
Like,
No, not
listen
quite
to my
that.
gospel sermon. Okay.
Someone just heard that. Some pastor
some
that's secretly. He's like, guys,
We're going to start handing out cassettes.
you know the guys in Times Square? Sermons.
Okay, so you're handing out tracks?
So handing out tracts, like I was always expecting anybody else that had a different belief system to drop everything that they believed to hear me because I had the truth.
Yes.
And if anybody, like if me and you met each other, you know, I would have been like, you should come to my church. And you would have been like, you should come to my church. And then if you said you should come to my church, I would almost laugh you out of the room and be like, yeah, I'm not going to a Mormon church. Ha ha ha. That's crazy talk. You know what I mean? I started thinking about that. I was like, well, why do I expect you to come to my church then? If I am expecting you to drop everything that you've ever been taught is true and throw your lenses that you've seen the world through up in the air and just come over to my perspective and put on my lenses for a second and adopt my, you know, version of truth or my perspective on how things work, why would I not be willing to do that for you?
Yep.
How is that not the height of hypocrisy to expect everybody to believe what I believe? But if you dare to try to get me to believe what you believe, like you're barking up the wrong tree. Like, wow, that's tough to live with after you come to that conclusion, you know?
Unfortunately, this spills over to more than religion into politics and stuff like that, but that's probably a different conversation another day.
Probably. Well, it's way past what I wanted to interject, but I do love that I keep trying to telepathically send messages to you.
I know, you just keep looking at me, I'm like, stop looking at me.
Because they said something and then I'm like, and you're just, I don't know. But I am curious. So like the isolating, scary part is, I mean, can take years. Like how long did it take before you told anybody
My doubts?
that you were doubting?
The first person I told was my assigned marriage wife.
Yeah, and when did you get married? Within college? And
I was
then,
almost 5. I was almost
Like,
5.
how old were you when you got in college? And
skipped
then when
almost
you got
5.
married? How-
I was almost 25.
Wait.
Okay.
I skipped something important then. You got married at 25 through an arranged marriage.
Yes.
Talk about that first before my thing.
This was post college though?
Yes.
Yeah, I was like, when did you?
So
in
you were
college when
still
were
looking the
younger?
part, but also inside were like,
Oh, yeah.
this makes no sense.
Yeah, right. So,
But you still got married when you thought it didn't make sense.
yes.
Oh,
Interesting.
Lord.
Dude, we got needs. Men have needs.
And there was no other option.
There was no other option.
You were right about that.
And yeah, like the first time I ever kissed a girl was the day was my wedding day after I was married.
Nice.
So
How was it?
Was you didn't kiss on the altar? You said
Anticlimactic.
after you were married. Did you not kiss her on the altar?
not
No,
really.
after they...
There's like
An
these
apprenticeship.
temple special handshake shit that's more of like a prayer that you do. I can't tell you. You have to go to the temple. I'm just kidding.
Okay, so you really don't kiss on the altar when you're Mormon?
There's not really an altar. At least the way I got
didn't know that.
married. You like kneel. And you have to do this special handshake. You can Google it, but like you,
You can Google
It's
it.
top
you
secret.
have like your finger.
You can Google it.
You have
Pull that
like your
up. Pull that
finger on each other's like what do you call it? Like vein, and it's supposed to do something special that makes it super eternal. After that, we did kiss.
Okay.
Nice.
Anticlimactic, not that cool. I was like, I waited all this time for this, you know. But anyway, what was the question?
You got married at 25
Oh, well,
through
the-
arranged
the-
marriage. That was weird.
Well, like just I
something
think
about
just
the-
clarify.
like,
I think just clarify
Where
the
you were
timeline.
at when you got
Yeah,
married.
like-
Oh, how long it took was part of this,
Yeah.
and who
Yeah.
I
And you
dated.
told her.
Yeah. So again, keep in mind, throughout a lot of my studying, I was studying to try to figure it out and hopefully come back to the conclusion. And I still wanted to be a good person. Like
Yeah.
I had decided when I was 15, I'm not gonna kiss any woman until I get married, because if you had sex before marriage, that's a fast track to hell.
Right.
You know? And
You get AIDS.
yeah, and there were a few things you can't repent from, and for whatever reason, my dad taught sex was one of those. You can't repent from sex before marriage. If you had sex before marriage, there are blessings that you would have gotten in the afterlife that are just forfeited. And so
That's a new angle.
Oh yeah,
I don't remember that one.
yeah, and so kissing can lead to sex. So don't even kiss. It's like there's this whole book. There's this whole book on habits. What's it called? The James Clear book.
Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits. Basically, the first thing is like the cue. So kissing is the cue, and so get rid of the cue, and then you never lead to the actual habit, right? So, so I never kissed, and then after getting married, the woman I was married to, she grew up in a much more liberal family, which was amazing because it made me realize that there's gray area.
Well, but she was still in the same church, though.
Same church. Different city. She lived 4 hours away.
Oh, really?
And her family went to college.
Interesting.
Completely different. And that was so good for my process because it made me realize even within this, there's
nuance.
And your parents were cool with that? That they were more liberal?
No.
I thought you said it was arranged.
But the church
My parents didn't arrange.
The church did.
Yeah. So the church arranged it.
How does that work? You just put your name like on a list of like, okay, I'm ready to get married?
Kind of. It can happen.
I want to have sex now.
See, this
Exactly.
is how
Give me a vessel.
They let women control it for the most part.
Interesting.
We need a button sound.
So the young women will go to the church leaders and say, "I'm ready to get married. Will you assign me?" Essentially,
not too different. Just on the list.
And they can sometimes say, "Do you have somebody in mind?" You got to keep in mind, like marriage in my religion is like they believe it, like it's God ordaining
basically.
it. Yeah, like you are just, it's the Disney version of marriage. Like Disney talks about like there's the one that's for you and like you have soulmates. Like we literally believed that. And so
but there's like 5 for you though.
Yes. That's the difference.
5 ones.
It's like marriage. It's like
It's a small difference.
Yeah.
Remember the Disney movie?
Everyone's really just wondering why you got out of having
Beauty and
5
the
wives
Beast.
right now.
Yeah.
Beauty and the
Besides
Beast.
that, yeah, that's the only difference.
Beauties and the
you
Beast.
have soulmate and you have a soulmates. Yeah, soulmates. So so God's ordaining it and stuff. So and you can help God out if you're a woman, like by saying if you've had like a spiritual impression of who the guy is that you should marry.
So if you like somebody,
Dude, there's got to be some toxic women that are like, I feel really impressed.
Okay, wait, so wait, I have a question though.
Yeah.
So, okay, so
Lord
you have
told
this list. So the girl gets on the list and then you get on the list. So then how do you get another wife? Like, how is that process then? Are you just always
a
on the
lot of
list
questions
once you're
about
on
this.
the
like
list?
as a guy, are
Yeah.
you always
there? Like, are you always available?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
In fact, I never wore a wedding ring because a wedding ring means that you're taken.
And you're never taken.
And I'm never taken.
Did she wear a wedding
me,
ring?
bitch? Huh?
Did she wear a wedding
Of
ring?
course. She had to say.
You know,
in the
I can get
ceremony
on
that
board for a few of these things.
But that's what I mean. It's so
she's
clear.
like she gave herself to me. I didn't give myself to you.
But
the
it's
ceremony.
so clear. But that's the stuff for me that's like so clear that dudes came up with so many of these religions.
Yeah.
Oh, dude.
Okay. Also,
Totally.
though. Okay, wait. I
Totally.
have so many questions. Okay.
Are you
so
trying to
then
get on the
what-
list?
Yeah. She's like,
No.
where's
Like, where
this
do you
list?
sign up?
What is happening? So wait, what were your vows then? Because like normal wedding vows are like, you are my only forever till death do us part.
Okay,
So,
so
did she say it and you didn't say it till
Kind
death
of.
do us part?
Yeah. To his
Do
point.
us part? Why am I
It's
like
very.
saying it that word? I'm
Till death do
struggling.
us part?
Death
It's like-
do us part.
So,
I'm struggling.
we
I've
made fun
got
of you
so
guys.
many-
It's like General Grievous, like another lightsaber from my collection.
Okay,
But
wait,
it's
what?
women.
So we made fun of churches like you guys. Like our church is way cooler. Like most churches, they have to when they die, they can't stay together. Ours is eternal. We're way cooler. So we're like married for eternity beyond death.
Because you believe your souls existed forever before.
Oh yeah, here's the quick
Theory,
story.
yeah.
We are spiritual people. God and his wives fucked a lot and made spiritual babies. And we're here because the one thing that is very awesome to have is a body, because you need a body for some sort of growth and to someday eventually have your own planet, your own universe. You will become a god. Like you can go through the whole process.
Yeah,
And
this
so
is sounding more interesting the more we get into it.
and so, oh yeah,
didn't know
like
that?
No, I get it,
there's a whole thing about like
become a
me
god, get my
trying
own
to find
planet.
meaning, because this honestly sounds so cool to get to have this that it's like how can I get even close to this now that this isn't real? But you get to come have a body, and the only job here is to choose between good and bad. And if you choose the good, then after this life, you'll have more good and eventually be a god, have your god wives, fuck a lot in the spiritual world, have spiritual babies, and start the whole process again.
So it's just a test.
Dope.
So then what is the wedding ceremony for then?
So the wedding ceremony is to seal you for time and all eternity, and for the woman to give herself to the man, and whenever the question is, well, don't you give yourself to the woman? No, a man gives themselves to Jesus. And a man is connected to Jesus forever. You're connected to the man forever. Amen. Yeah. This is what I said this week. I ended one of my comedy sets in the name of Jesus fucking Christ. Amen. So that's like a prayer. This is my prayer in the name of Jesus fucking Christ. Amen.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so she gave herself to me.
Okay. So in between, so you got married when 25.
25.
When did you finish college?
Almost 25. As soon as I finished.
So did you go a little bit later then? You went to college at 21?
Yeah.
So, okay. So 21, finished college around that
24,
time.
20. Yeah, I was 24.
Like how you did kindergarten for like 4 years.
I was 24, almost 25 when I finished.
So where were you mentally then at that point? Like if you were getting married, like when you finished college, where were you mentally right there?
At that point, I was at the place of, I still want to find out what's true. I don't know what's true. And I want to have the best thing. And the best thing in my context right there was having God give me my spouse. Okay. Like if they come to me and I can feel good about having sex, I want to have sex.
Yeah.
And I want it to be God ordained for me to have sex. Like I have all these urges and stuff, but I want it to be like have God's blessing on my fucking. Yes, Eric.
So let's put a pin there. No, I do want to ask about one thing because like I've ended up on Mormon TikTok a lot lately.
Mormon
in
TikTok.
the algorithm,
okay.
And like one of the things that gets talked about from like ex-Mormons is this whole soaking thing.
Oh yeah,
is that a legit thing that people do?
Oh yeah.
Because I'm fascinated.
We're gonna need some context here.
Okay.
Soaking.
I have no idea what soaking is.
So
I've never heard of that.
Get ready. Put on a seatbelt.
Okay. Okay.
It's the best.
You cannot have sex. You cannot have sex if you are like, because again, you could be damned. There are blessings you cannot have if you have sex before marriage. What is sex? Well, fucking involves in and out. That is fucking. Okay. So this is a biological lesson.
Oh, I have heard of
soaking,
this.
Soaking is, well, what if I just go in and sit there? That's
what?
Yeah.
No, seriously.
So you can, so that is like, that's so smart. That's outsmarting God. So if you're, so you can soak and not be damned. Yeah. You can just insert. But then the whole thing is like, the whole fun joke is like, then you can get a third person involved and like jump on the bed and stuff. And like, you're not doing it, you know?
I heard this is big. No, because there was a TikTok and they said at BYU, they said something about like their dorm mate or something was like the jumper.
Yeah.
When you're the jumper.
Yeah.
That is the best loophole of all time.
So that is
Very
soaking.
creative. That's what
can
happens
say,
when you have a 20-something-year-old man trying to figure out how he can have sex
Talk
in
about
college.
figuring it
Wow.
out.
Oh, dude.
You jump. Wait, jump faster.
If it just happens to go in and out, but I'm not doing the
That's
action.
the whole Chris D'Elia if you trip and fall.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So that's how it sounds. Who's
great.
the TikToker? Is it some guy?
There's a bunch. I get them all the time.
Okay. Because there's, I
watch all of them. Whenever I get any culty weird stuff, I watch it. So I guess.
So let's jump to now then. Where are you at
Wait,
now?
I want to go to right after marriage though, because there's a lot that's happening. When did we meet? How old were we when we met? 2018, 2017?
When did we meet?
We met at First Thrive.
First Thrive?
Met at First Thrive.
Is that 2016?
2017.
17, yeah, 17.
First
2017 in Vegas.
Hold on.
Right before the
moved
shooting.
to Vegas in
First,
2018.
that's not First Thrive.
No, that was like Thrive 3. It was my first Thrive.
Oh, got it. So then...
You call yours the first. The first that
Holy shiz. So
that was when we met, but we didn't really know each other that well.
We met, I was still in the religion. We were at the tail end. So I had not left the religion yet.
And you were still married.
I was still married.
How old were you?
In 20, I was turning 30.
Okay.
So, so are you wondering where I was mentally at that stage? Or?
Okay, before we jump to that though, then, because that is something that I feel like I want to talk about too, though. So, how was your culture then sexually? Like, once you were married, did you feel like you or your wife struggled with like your sex life when you got married? Then I don't know if that's TMI, but like,
I honestly wish we talked more about this.
Because I feel like that's something we don't talk about. Because something that I struggled with a lot when I got married, because I was such a rule follower that it was hard for me as a woman to just flip the switch to become a sexual person for my husband. So, like, how was that process for you guys?
So. We were, again, we were both virgins when we got married. Yeah. So at the beginning, it was a little weird and stuff, but then we started to explore a little bit with like what we were into. Like, can you do more than missionary? Can you do all this stuff? And then we started to realize there's this whole buffet of what people do, you know, and find out what you wanted. So at the beginning, it was a little bit of a struggle and stuff, but then...
Did you think something was wrong with you guys, or did you think that like, oh, this needs
to be a little bit at first. A little bit at first, we were like one of my biggest fears was getting married and not getting to have sex naked. That's going to sound weird. Yep. So
I have nothing to add. Go ahead. Leaving a pause for us to answer.
Wait, what? So in Mormon culture, and especially the fundamentalist Mormon culture, we have these things that some people now call, if you're outside of it, Jesus jammies. Special underwear. And
Sam talked about that.
And so in Mormon culture, it's called the garments. The garments protect you. Like we have just how you guys told a story earlier about the AIDS thing. We have all these stories in about these horrible accidents that happened to people. They got in this horrible car wreck and they were saved because they wore the garments. And I fucking got in a car wreck and I was okay. And I was sure it was because of the garments, you know? And people that are super hardcore about their garments have stories about somebody loved their garments so much that when they would shower, they would take one off, half of their body and wash it, and the other half and wash it and never fully take them off. That's how much they love their garments.
Where do you get the garments from?
You're supposed to...
Walmart.
Well, where you're really supposed to get them is from somebody that makes them in the church that are assigned and they have like certain symbols on them and stuff. We grew up just buying them from IFA country store or whatever.
But so they were blessed by God, though.
Exactly. They were training garments is what they were. So we were someday going to get these garments that were really special but treat your long underwear. This is so good to saying it out loud. But if you treat your IFA long underwear single garments, then you'll be blessed in this life too. So I wanted to have sex naked so bad because I was afraid that she was going to want to wear garments and I was going to not get to see a naked woman even if I'm married, all that sort of stuff. Thankfully, she never wore garments, even though I grew up wearing them. But yeah, to go back to the sex thing, it was an evolution. We started super like awkward, vanilla, and then started to explore stuff. And we thought for sure, like nobody else ever has given a blowjob before. Like no one else. Like that's too much. Sex is just for procreating. We're having sex just because it feels good. I hope that's okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But did you feel like that was wrong?
A little bit at first.
Okay.
Yeah. A little bit.
So good. How could it be wrong?
Exactly.
It feels so right.
Yeah.
So you were taught then, even though sex was only for marriage, then even during marriage, though, you aren't supposed to enjoy it's only for procreation. Then.
Yeah, and that was debatable. So I had that. Like some families viewed it differently, and my super conservative grandfather once said that he just said the line that sex is for more than just making kids, and I was like, yes,
yeah.
But
check. Okay, I'm good with that one.
But this kind of ties to what I was asking before we hit record, though, because like we joke about it, but it is clear that like there's some dudes that wanted some power and started religion, like Joseph Smith. You know, like that was totally his jam.
Did you ever watch the South Park Mormonism episode?
Dude,
yeah,
always
it's so
the
good.
South Park plugs.
So good.
But anyway,
that one episode in particular is fantastic.
In the waters, trying different things, like doing things that would be taboo for some, and realizing there's gray. At what point do you feel comfortable broaching like, hey, what if we're also missing some things religiously or philosophically, like when do you broach that conversation with your wife?
That happened. It started really in small ways early on.
Like you almost like hinting at something to see if she'd bring it up, or
she actually had similar questions too, believe it or not. Like because she came from a very much more liberal thinking family than I did.
Still in polygamy though, like same church.
Same church. She grew up with 5 moms, a lot of siblings, very much so. But she doubted a lot of what my dad taught, which made me question what I believed. We never we never had Christmas. That was just one thing. Like my dad, she grew up with Christmas, loved Christmas. And Christmas was a wrong holiday because it was like invented by pagans and was just commercialized and all this stuff. And that was a big thing in the first year of our marriage. Are we going to celebrate Christmas? Are we going to get a tree? Because that's like idol worship, having a tree that people love. And
really,
you
your
can't
dad
idol
didn't want to
worship.
buy gifts for 40.
That's really right.
He's like, I'm having a vision. No Christmas.
Exactly. So that caused doubt. And then, so we question it a lot. But what really, really blew the doors wide open was we did something that no one in my family had ever done. We left Utah and came and lived out in California. And I did door to door, started meeting other.
Where did you move?
To San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah. Oceanside specifically. But
that's funny. You moved out of Utah to do door to door.
Exactly. I know. Solar was big in California, but as I started to experience world outside of the bubble, dude, that's really what made it just like, it's hard to explain to people. Like it's a whole different world when you're outside of certain bubbles. It's not like you're just out in California. It feels like you're in a different planet when you're outside of the bubble. And I started to associate with other people that were super Christian and they had God experiences. And I was like, what? Like you talk about having things contradict. Like nobody was supposed to have God experiences because in my church, we're the only ones that have like authority is huge. Authority to speak for God is huge in my church. Like that's how we're the right church, even compared to other fundamentalist Christian churches, is we're the ones that have the true priesthood, the authority of God to spread messages, to give blessings. And I had talked to these people that had these deep spiritual experiences. I went to the C3 church down there. Like I'm not particularly Christian, but I had like a good time. I was like, whoa, this is scary. And then I started to talk to more people. I started to travel the world. I went to Israel. I met with Jews and went to the Western Wall and saw that it was a completely different religion. And they were just as ardent, in fact, deeper and more passionate about their beliefs than I ever was. And I just started to realize, oh, it makes sense now why, like I was in a bubble. And they're in a bubble. Like
you're in the cave.
Yeah, I was in the cave. And then what I really started to just really get down to is, you were just saying a little bit earlier about like you wanting to believe it for yourself. I got to a place where I wanted to believe the things that felt congruent with who I was. And some of them were very obvious things now. Like I believe that women should get equal say in things.
Wait, what?
Exactly, right?
Okay.
And then a whole other conversation that I haven't talked a whole lot on anything is the incredible amount of racism in my church. There was only white people in my church.
That's interesting.
And black people.
How big was the church?
Not too big. Like maybe
just your family is 44.
Exactly. So maybe a big, I think less than 2,000.
Okay.
That's still big, though.
But in fundamentalist Mormonism, I think it's like that they estimate between 30 and 50,000. But my particular church, about 2,000.
Well, Joseph Smith was hardcore racist, though.
Yeah. And so my church is proud of the fact that they have never changed. The original doctrine of Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was racist, so we're racist too. Hooray. So incredibly racist. On the website. Like in every single way that
we are not an equal opportunity employer.
Yeah. Like it's almost uncomfortable to even talk about, like to the point that if you were to ever have sex with a black person, then you're damned.
Wow.
Because they're lesser than you. Like the whole story behind black people, there's a whole story around it. It's like, in the pre-existence, there were two brothers that presented a plan to God. Like, how are we going to do this whole earth thing? And one brother said, we're going to give everybody a body. They can do no wrong, but God, I want all the honor and glory. And he's like, okay, anybody else have an idea? And another brother said, we'll give them a body. They'll sin. I will sacrifice myself to cover that sin, and I'll give you the honor and glory, God. And God's like, we'll go with that idea. Those two brothers are the devil and Jesus, that were brothers in the pre-existence. And a lot of spirits in heaven were like, we like that. We like our brother Jesus's idea. And then some people were like, we fucking hate Jesus's idea. And then another third of people were like, we can't decide. Like, we love our brother, our devil brother, and Jesus. We can't decide. I am a good spirit because I chose Jesus' side. That's why I'm white.
Interesting.
There are people that chose Lucifer's side. They're hell's angels. They never got a body. They're just going straight to hell.
Demons.
Then there are people that didn't pick. They sat on the fence. Those are black people.
Wait, what about
That's literally what I was taught.
Hispanics or Asian?
Exactly. This gray area stuff. Like, there's more than two fucking people.
Races,
There's
yeah.
more than two races. Like, when you're in it, and it's like, you're either, the people, like, you're either white or black. Like, that's how it was discussed. I was like, dude, I've traveled. There's a lot more than white and black.
But but like Ruckman in like the Baptist world taught that stuff about like the mark of Cain, like that was their dark skin. But it's again,
that's what we used.
It's different, but it's the same. It's
So
the
great.
same.
The mark of
stuff.
Cain is black people. So there's all this stuff that I'm like, I don't believe that at all. Like, in my soul, like to feel that I am better because we're here to just on the simple grounds of like, if I'm going to be judged by my actions, why the fuck am I getting a pass because I'm white?
Yeah. Well, like, that's the thing is like, even if that were true, why wouldn't it just damn the first generation of people who actually chose it?
Yeah. Like, what did
why
this guy do?
Like, this happened like 3,000 years ago. It's like, wait.
Yeah, and it was like somebody else could, and we had this whole thing in my dad's family that you could be damned on accident. That, like, if somebody went and had sex with a black person
On accident?
no.
Oh.
But then if a woman, if a woman,
He's blind.
This was one of my biggest arguments that made no sense when I was a teenager. If a woman went and had sex with a black person, she's cursed. If she goes and has sex with her husband and doesn't tell him, he's now cursed. I'm like, that
Because
makes no
she had
goddamn
sex
sense.
with a black
Passed it
person?
to him.
Exactly, because she passed it to him. And I'm like, are you, what? Somebody condemn you? And you didn't even know it. You're good your whole life, and you get to the other side. Sorry, bro. You're a bitch. Fucked a black guy when you were on that trip, so you're actually damned. It's like, what? So there's all these things that just start stacking.
Can black
up.
people convert?
Yes, they can. They can convert, but they cannot ever hold the priesthood. They can be
racist.
Oh, dude, it's so goddamn racist.
On the nose.
Well,
racist.
This is how racist this
Blatantly
was.
racist.
So priesthood is this whole thing. Like, you want to have this thing called the priesthood. It's the power of God, the legitimate power of God that has been passed down from Jesus through giving somebody with the laying on of hands. That's important to be like, I hold the priesthood that I got all the way from Jesus. Jesus got it from John the Baptist. Then Jesus gave it to his disciples. The disciples gave it to others. And it's to us now. Like, it came all the way to us into these days. Nobody can just pop up and say, I speak for Jesus, because that's like a false prophet. And priesthood could never be given to a black person because they're cursed and whatnot. Where was I going with this? There's something important I want to. Oh, when I got given the priesthood, this is so fucked up, and I've never shared this with anybody publicly. And I just want to be like, this is in this generation, because people say, is racism real? Like, it sure the fuck was where I came from. Yeah. So as soon as I got given the priesthood, I'm like 14 years old. My grandfather, who's still alive, he's one of the church leaders still. He puts his hand up and says, hey, give me a high five. And I give him a high five. Now never do that ever again. And I was like, wait, what? He was like, I just want to teach you a lesson. I want to show you what I mean. Never, ever give anybody a high five as long as you live. It came from the effing N-word. It came from the N-word, like full thing, hard R, everything. That's where it came from. Came from those black people. Never do it. Wow. That's how racist.
Wow.
You can't even.
You can't high five.
You can't have. Don't say father. Say father to your parent because daddy was invented by black culture. Like that type of shit is what they say. Like it was so goddamn racist.
So do they like claim to be racist then? Or are they just like own it? Or they just say it's not?
It depends on who you talk to. Some say I'm not racist. My dad would say, hell yeah, I'm racist and I'm damn proud of it. That's what he would say.
Wow.
Because God's racist. That's what he says.
Wow.
It's so fucked up. The more you step away from this, it's so crazy to look at. I'm glad I'm doing comedy now as a hobby. Just because
there's a lot of material.
There's a lot of material.
Shortage of material in there.
It's so crazy. So a lot of these things started to stack. That's kind of where we were going. And that's what made me ultimately say.
So I'm curious on then, so the side you're talking about, you're traveling. So you moved to Oceanside, you're traveling, all that stuff. Where is your wife at this time with everything? Do you have kids at this point? Like where did kids come into the play? Kids
so when we moved out to California, we both just took the plunge, put everything in a U-Haul. We had a 1-year-old son at the time.
Oh, okay. And
she's questioning too, honestly. And she was more, we flipped from where we were when we were married. Like when we first got married, I was like this super shy, conservative boy. And she comes from a more liberal family. She had traveled. She'd gone to another country before. She'd gone to New York, Washington, D.C. I hadn't done any of that. And then I got into this whole phase of like, when I moved to California, it's when I became an entrepreneur. I quit my day job and I'm going to like do this whole personal development thing. And it got to a point where the gap got wider and wider and wider, where I was like, I don't know if I can continue on with this. Yeah. But it took a long time for me to even say it out loud to myself, let alone to someone else. Yeah. There's this whole interview that's on YouTube with Anthony Padilla, and he plays the audio recording. I have an audio note to myself when I say it out loud for the first time. And this part's edited out, but it takes me like 20 minutes to say it. I think I'm going to leave. I don't think I believe in this. I don't think I'm going to stay in this religion. And so it was a big deal because it's like, what if you're wrong? What if you're damned? What if all this stuff? And so it took me a long time to finally say it out loud to myself. And then eventually I told her.
It's so important for people to hear that I think are still in whatever it is. Because I think the view that I had, even up until a few months ago, like there's that part of you when you're clinging to your religious belief that like the people that left are bitter on some level, or they're confused.
I think it's very easy
or they're doing it because they want to be able to do something.
Yeah.
And it's like, then when you're sitting there and you're grappling with like, I know I need to leave and it's hard because there's so much that I want to be true. Like that's a really scary thing. And like I said, like when I left like religion in general, like I had people that were like, man, that's so scary. That's such a scary thing for you. And I'm sitting there going like, it's not. It was hard leaving, but I'm not all these things that you assume that I am. You know what I mean? And it wasn't a flippant thing. Yeah. I think we always assume there's like
people
this
in
thing,
the cave, man. Like it's scary to leave the cave because you don't know. It's the admission that you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's what's
and it only gets harder the more years you put into it.
Everybody craves certainty. Yeah. Like that's one of our just human desires is certainty. And there's so many things that play off of having certainty in life, like the direction that you're headed in, the stress that you have, the anxiety about the future, the worry that you have. It's all based in whether or not you're certain that something's going to happen or something's not going to happen.
That's and where like so many embracing, it's like that. There's that struggle that I think when you hear someone from a sermon talk about it, like they talk about it like it was this flippant decision, no research, no thought. Yeah, right. And it's like, no, I was 30 something with a kid and a wife and like, this was my life.
Right.
There's so much weight to
They left because they wanted to drink and have sex. Not
exactly.
It's like, we're wrong. Yeah.
No.
Well, I want to do those things too, just to be fair.
But see, that's the funny part too, though. It will just like made me like think in my mind too of like, I feel like that is the one thing I will be grateful for the way we were raised was I never thought that. Like I always have clung to the fact of like, if I'm living my life now wrong, like we didn't lose our salvation. So like I know I'm still going to heaven because the way we were taught being raised was that like
of eternal security.
Yeah, your internal like once you ask God into your heart, like you never lose that. So that has always been. But my kids have changed that for me because I always like the years before I had kids was always like, well, I know that if I know for sure I believed it when I was in it. So like I can't lose it, so I'm good. But then it changed it when I had my kids because then it was like, okay, but like they're not good. So like that's what I think was like the biggest like I gotta figure my shit out now because I'm good, but am I really gonna live my life where I'm okay and my kids aren't okay? Yeah. Absolutely not. And that was when I feel like was the biggest like I'm gonna figure out what is true and what isn't true or where I stand on it at least because I gotta protect my kids.
Yeah. And I think that does it for a lot of people. And honestly, I think also what makes a lot of people become religious.
Yeah.
Because they want something good for their kids. Yeah. Like, well, I know that Sunday school was good.
Like that was all of our parents. Yeah. You know, like they're trying to do the best that every parent, man. Like if you love your kids, you're just trying to do the best that you can for your kids.
Yeah.
And that's honestly what I feel really like right now. The person I was married to is a polygamist. We separated and it's a big part of it was like the safety security thing. In my opinion, that like that's all she knew. So I thought when we left that maybe she would go and find her own thing and get out of it, but she's in it and I've had to come to peace with that. And ultimately I'm happy for her if she's happy. But the thing that I love is my kids. I love my kids and they get to see two very different worlds.
Yeah, that's fair. That's
they get to be in a place that is ultimately very happy and nurturing because they have a lot of friends and cousins and stuff that they're having a good time with. And they get to travel the world a little bit. They get to leave the bubble. They get to associate with me. They get to like, I that makes me really happy just as a parent that they are safe on their physical level and they get to have something that I would have never gotten to have. And that is some exposure to different things.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's the thing, man. Like you got to do the best you can by your kids and shape them into people that can make their own decisions and trust that they're going to come to the right conclusions for them.
That's the thing is that most kids don't get one. Most are raised any side of it. Like, oh, my dad never goes to church. We don't go to church. There's this, or we always go to like, to have an option to make a choice for yourself is non-existent for most kids. Like, across the board. Like it's just whatever my parents are, I am.
Yeah. And that's something that I'm very grateful for with the mother of my children is that we both agree, even if she's in the religion, ultimately she knows it has to be their choice. And so
that's awesome.
We're both really into like, they are developing into two really independent, empowered kids. Like anything from just their opinions to like if they become interested in something like the universe, then we take them to like everything that we can, like planets, like go to museums and learn about the universe. Well, they get into dinosaurs, you know, let them have something that's their thing and learn that they can figure stuff out, you know? So that's something I'm grateful for with my kids.
Timeline from when you talked to your wife or decided to leave until you did your first ayahuasca journey?
2 weeks.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Jeez.
You just dove in.
Yeah, because I had heard
your wife was like, okay, cool. Yeah, take off to Costa Rica for a week.
One day that you were just like, I'm going to leave so you can either come with me or make your own decision, or how was that conversation?
Yeah, I just made the decision and I wasn't gonna, there's so many people and I have this with my kids sometimes. There's people that I think use the things that matter to them as an excuse to stay small or not evolve. And I say that lovingly. Like, for example, there's a lot of people that say, oh, I wish I could XYZ, but I can't because of my kids or something like that. And I just didn't want to do that, especially with some big decision like I'm leaving the religion. So once I left, I'd listened to enough podcasts, enough research on ayahuasca that's like this like just complete different perspective shift.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have a clean slate, so to speak. And I really just wanted to find a part of myself that was as close to who I am outside of my religion as possible. So I had already been big on the personal development stuff, was going to a lot of conferences. So my wife at the time was used to that. And so it wasn't a surprise to her when I said, I'm going to go to Costa Rica and do ayahuasca for 7 days. And yeah, we'll see what happens.
7 days. How many days did you actually like
take ayahuasca?
Yeah.
4 days.
4 days.
4 days, night after night after night, 4 days in a row.
Wow.
It's bananas.
How was that experience?
It's so hard to describe.
Yeah.
Because every night was so different. And I had a really crazy first experience because this was before I'd even been high. I'd never even been high on weed.
Dude,
Did you drink at all?
Very little.
But never been like plastered, drunk.
Had never been.
So this is the first time you've been in like any sort of altered state of consciousness.
In a big way, yeah. And I had tried to get high and I had never been high. And I was like, my body just can't respond to substances is what I thought.
Oh, let's not share with the world that story.
So
the world is not ready for that story.
That's a story out there. Yeah, like as soon as I say that, you guys look at Jackie. So I felt like I couldn't get high. So this is what's wild. Instead of having one shot of ayahuasca, you're on the moon all night. Like it's just gone. I was so concerned that it wouldn't work that I took 4.
Oh my God. Oh God.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
So you're still high.
Oh, dude.
Pretty much.
So we're concluding
We're
part of here.
Yeah, dude. So,
Wow.
So I talked to the shaman. I was like, "What's the most you ever took a night?" And he's like, 3. I'm like, "Okay." So I had.
So you're a
last
shaman
night.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
I fucked up.
There's so many people that take ayahuasca and become shamans. It's like annoying. But anyway, I just tell you that because it's hard to describe. Because for some people's experiences, it can last from like 3 to 6 hours, and I was like in it for 12, like just super deep, super in it. And probably some of the best takeaways. One of the coolest experiences I ever had was I got to walk into a memory. You can imagine how cool that is. Like as clear as I'm seeing this. Like the big question, I had a burning question. It was like, okay, give me some thread that I can pursue of who the fuck am I that's not culturally based, that's not based on my religion. Give me something. And I started to have this experience where first this is going to sound totally random. Like, where's this going? Ants were in my view, like up close. And I was like, what the? And I was like, why am I seeing ants up close?
12 hours of this? Oh God.
Like this is horrible. And I'm like squirming and in this like vision or whatever, and ants are up close and I'm just like trying to get the ants away. And I'm like, does this mean there are ants in my head? Is my mind dirty? What is this? And I remember the shaman saying before we took the ayahuasca that you will get opportunities on ayahuasca to go a good way or an ugly way. He's like, if you're ever given the opportunity to see, if you see rainbows and unicorns and your creepy neighbor that you never want to talk to, if you want to get the most out of ayahuasca, go to the creepy neighbor.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I know. Say no, thank you. I'm good.
And so in that moment, I thought of that when I was on ayahuasca and I was like, okay, I'm not going to resist these ants anymore. I'm going to accept them as though I chose them. And I accepted the ants. And it was a really cool experience because as soon as I did, it kind of zoomed out so I couldn't see them up close. And all of a sudden they zoomed from my vision and they're like on the ground and they're walking and they're leading me somewhere. So it was really fucking cool. Like they zoomed out and it was almost like this whole thing that I thought was a problem. They're like getting my attention, like follow us.
Yeah.
And I follow them and I'm just following this trail of ants. And before I know it, the trail where the ground that they're on is incredibly familiar because it's the grounds at my dad's house when I was a kid before we built the addition. There's a sidewalk in front of in the backyard, right outside the door. Like I see the cracks in the sidewalk and everything. I was like, holy shit, I've been here before. This is cool. And then the line of ants goes into a pile of ants on the sidewalk. And there's this little 4 or 5-year-old boy on his belly on the sidewalk looking at the pile of ants. And it was me.
That's crazy.
I feel high right now.
And I remember, I know that day. I remember that fucking day. The family was in the house watching a cartoon or some Disney movie. And I was outside one afternoon on my belly, just looking at these pile of ants. And I got to see that again. And the message I got was, this is you.
Start there.
This is you in your normal state.
The curious kid outside when everybody else is.
Wow.
Bingo.
Yeah.
And so I was like, yeah, that was the message I got. Like, you're like, that's a place to start. Who you are is like, nobody made you do this. Nobody conditioned you. Yeah. This was you in your natural state, just curious, looking at ants. Like, what are they doing? And I remember that day. And so that was a big takeaway for me on ayahuasca.
Start wrapping it up here, bro. What now? What are you thinking nowadays? How are you
staying
continuing to how are you continuing to, figure it out?
The pandemic was interesting. Because it was like a big figuring it out, the separation, the divorce was a long process. And even though it's been a while that I've been out of it hasn't been that long, because I left the religion and then was still married for a while, was still in the culture. It's only been a year that I've been living for myself fully.
Wow.
And so the figuring it out now is like realizing things like, this really is my life.
Yeah.
I really don't have to ask my daddy or some church permission. What do I want to do? And it's been leaning into more things that just are interesting to me, that I care about. So one thing I got curious about is writing a children's book. It's just something I want to do. So I tapped into that creativity, and I'm into comedy right now. So just doing comedy and using it as therapy. And I'm glad this show isn't, I figured it out.
Yeah.
This is how I did.
We couldn't be on it.
Yeah. Like it's
a short show.
Yeah. So it's honestly, I'm in a state right now that I'm glad I can say what I'm about to say, because I could not have said this right after leaving. I could not have said this even right after getting divorced. And I can finally say it. I'm happier than I've ever been. Mm-hmm. It feels so fucking good to be able to say that, because man, leaving was not easy. Going through the separation was not easy. Trying to figure out how are we going to balance this with having 2 awesome humans in my kids and still try to live my life. So I am figuring it out. And the big lesson over the last couple of months and last year that I've been figuring out is really understanding that I don't have to ask permission to do the things that my heart calls to do. And if that means living in a completely different place than I've lived my entire life, then I can do that and I can pursue these things. And not only is that okay, that's good. That's good for my system. That's good for my soul, if there is such a thing as a soul. But it's good. It's good for me. So yeah, just leaning into the things that matter to me. And right now, a lot of that is the creative side, whether that's writing, telling jokes, and just expressing myself. That feels really good.
That's awesome.
Well, dude, thanks for coming on, man. This has been a lot of fun. I know you came out here just to spend some time with us. So, dude, this was cool. This was a lot of fun. We could have done this for like 3 more hours. So
definitely.
I know.
This is a lot of fun.
It's fun. So good to have me. I'm super happy to be here. And
you say it was so good to have me.
It must have been amazing to speak with me for some time.
I love that you're in service of yourself now. That's good.
I'm starting another religion, guys. I'm good. I have these insights that
the angel came and talked to you now.
Yeah, I want you guys to be the first to do.
I'm so glad.
I'm happy you invited me. Thank you. And I hope that it's not 3 more years before I see you again, Travis.
Yes.
Yeah. No.
Next time, Costa Rica, you'll take 4. We'll just film the experience.
That sounds great.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. Awesome. Thanks for joining us. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, be sure to head over, give us a quick rating and review. It always helps the show. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button for more content just like this. We'll see you guys next time.